Hey, it's Justin Miller here, and with WizEye.com, and I'm doing this interview with a guy named Jason Roy. He's from Building 429. This interview is what I call a life changer interview, which is what I'm doing is every month we're going to have an interview with somebody that's doing something big for God. And anyway, Jason is one of those guys that has taken Building 429 from just a little idea and made it into something big. And he's making a difference. So anyway, Jason, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and just share with people what you're doing right now.
Yeah, man. My name's Jason Roy, lead singer of Building 429. I started the band back in 1999, much to the chagrin of my parents and of my church and of all my friends. Nobody understood how rock and roll and Christian music and God could all somehow mix together, and people could come to faith through a band. But we started it in 99. I was just hard-headed enough to make it happen. I booked 150 shows a year as an independent artist, just using Google back in 99. We did that for three years. And then in 03, one connection led to another, and I found myself sitting in the office of a record exec in Nashville, Skyscraper, and this person really liked my voice. They sent me home to write songs to see if I could write something that would be palatable, I guess, in Christian music. And I went home and wrote a song called Glory to Find and came back, and Building 429's career went from there. I've toured now for 12 years in this band. I'm married. My wife is one of the reasons that I am as focused as I am. In fact, you know that old saying, beside every great man is an even greater woman. It's absolutely true. My wife is by far the best part of my life. She is the strength in my life. Her name's Courtney. My wife and I have been married for 10 years. This is our 11th year right now. And my kids are just the joy of my life. My son, Avery, he's 8 years old. He's a killer drummer. He's an artist all the way to his core. Loves Jesus with all of his heart. My daughter, Haven, is 5. She's about to be 6, and she's a little songwriter. And so my family embraces what God has called me to, both on the road and at home. I'm also a worship pastor at my local church in my spare time. And so that's kind of a little bit of background on me and on where I come from and on my band.
So, from what I understand, when you were 5, your parents actually divorced and everything. Why don't you just, share with us some of the things that you had to go through to kind of get over that, to let God work in you even through something like that?
Yeah, well, the thing is divorce is what 70% of families today are going to face divorce, even inside the church. So the marriage is pretty much broken in a lot of ways in this country. And when I was 5 years old is when I recognized the brokenness of marriage. My mom and my dad. My mom actually offered my dad an ultimatum. My dad was the Texas State strongest man. He was this massive pro power lifter, and when you're in that realm, there are just different drugs and stuff like that are readily available to you. He was kind of a celebrity in our town, and he just kind of fell into the party lifestyle. My mom was a staunch Southern Baptist conservative who was going to raise her kids on the gospel. So help her God, you know what I mean? And when my dad started kind of going off the deep end, she gave him an ultimatum. It was either change that or this is over. And so Dad left us. And it became that really began an era where I didn't have a dad, you know what I mean? Like at all. And the guy that I thought was my dad, or the guy that I wanted to be my dad, he looked like a superhero on the outside. This guy looked like Superman. But his life was just falling apart. He ended up marrying a lady who was just had a lot of issues. And from the time I was 5 to the time I was, 15, all I ever wanted to do was be close to my dad. And my mom, in an effort to protect us, married a good, godly man who had the ability to move around the country. So we ended up living in California. My parents, we were from Texas, and we'd end up in another state. And I'd see my dad once a year. So anyway, when I was 15, for some reason, court systems think that you're old enough to decide where you want to live. They think you can make a wise decision. I don't know about that, but at 15, I went to court, and I had to tell my mom that I didn't want to live with her anymore. And I decided to move to live with my dad. And I look back on that day as the most sorrowful day of my life. I was in the courts. My mom was crying. My two sisters were at home waiting to find out if their brother was going to come home to be with them or go to live with his dad, who lived 1,000 miles away. And not that I was brainwashed, but I was just dead set that at 15 years old I had to live with my father. And my mom begged me, and I told her no, I didn't want to live with her anymore. So I moved to live with my father in Texas. It took me about 3 days to figure out the mistake that I had made.
Right.
Because on the third day, suddenly my dad started seeming a little bit odd. Suddenly he didn't make sense. Started seeing him kind of have problems controlling his temper and just raging. And what I didn't know is that was years of steroid abuse and drug abuse starting to show itself. And I basically spent 5 years in Texas with my father, finishing out high school in what I would call just a hell on earth, you know. There's nothing like believing somebody's your hero and then waking up and finding out that, in fact, they're nothing that you thought they were and that they were going to completely break your heart. And I say that about my dad today, but what's funny is with wisdom and with time, I've come to recognize that everybody in this life is going to let you down. My mom will let me down. My wife will let me down. But at the time, it just seemed like, how could this possibly happen? This guy was my hero, you know?
Right.
And so,
especially with it being your dad and everything, I mean, that's something that's hard because that's what you want to look up to.
That's right. That's right.
For myself, when I was 14, I lost my dad, and we had a really good relationship, and it was just suddenly, it was like my life was torn away. But your dad is a very, very important figure in the home.
Well, the interesting part about it was that I didn't know how else to rebel. I mean, my dad was as dark as he could possibly be, so the only thing I knew how to do, and my mom had instilled in me for years and years and years, was run to Jesus. And so when I turned 16, I got my license, and my dad and my stepmom would be at home asleep on Sunday mornings, and I would wake up my two stepsisters, and we'd get in the car, and I'd take them to the church. And so that became my way to rebel against my father, you know, and I had no idea that God was using that. And had a part-time youth pastor who was a transmission tech owner. Didn't even get paid to be a youth pastor, but he saw a gift in me. I started writing all these songs on an acoustic guitar about how bad it hurt and how it wasn't fair. And he said, man, Jason, you're gifted. You've got something special here. And you have hope. You know what the hope is. I would love to see what happened if you started writing songs about the hope that we have.